The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with laughter. Hundreds of alien delegates from across the known universe couldn't contain their amusement. On the massive central screen, Earth's announcement about their new ship played on repeat. Even the usually stoic rock-based life forms were shaking with mirth, their crystalline bodies clicking together in what passed for chuckling in their culture. A seventh-dimensional vessel. The council leader, a tall being with shimmering blue skin, wiped tears of amusement from his 3 eyes. These humans truly have no idea what they're talking about. Captain James Stone stood straight-backed before the council, his weathered face showing no emotion. Next to him, his second-in-command Tom Reed kept his hands clasped behind his back, knuckles white with tension. They had expected this reaction, but experiencing it firsthand was different. The Fibonacci, Stone began, his voice clear and steady, represents humanity's greatest achievement in space travel. This only brought another wave of laughter. My dear Captain, a delegate from the most advanced civilization spoke up, their voice dripping with condescension. Our species has been traveling through space for 50,000 years. We have only managed to harness fifth-dimensional technology. Are you suggesting that what do you call yourselves? Ah yes, humans, barely spacefaring for 2 centuries, have somehow surpassed us. Stone looked at the massive window behind the council seats. His ship, the Fibonacci, floated there in space. To the untrained eye, it looked deceptively simple, a long silver vessel with spiral patterns etched into its hull. The aliens saw it as primitive. They didn't understand that those spirals were more than decoration. We're not suggesting anything, Reed spoke up. We're stating a fact. The Fibonacci doesn't just travel through the 7th dimension, it exists in it. A delegate with tentacles waved them dismissively. Impossible. Your species still uses combustion engines for planetary travel. Half your population still thinks faster than light travel is science fiction. And yet here we are. Stone replied calmly. The council leader leaned forward. Captain Stone, we respect Earth's right to join these proceedings. Your species has shown remarkable progress for their age. But such outlandish claims damage your credibility. No race has ever managed to stabilize even 6th-dimensional travel. The energy requirements alone would be impossible using conventional methods. Stone finished for him. We know. That's why we didn't use conventional methods. More laughter filled the chamber, a holographic being flickered with amusement. They probably think folding paper 8 times means they understand dimensional physics. Stone pulled out a small device from his pocket. The chamber's security systems immediately scanned it and found it harmless, just a simple data projector. He placed it on the floor, and with a click, it displayed the Fibonacci's schematics. The laughter gradually died down as the aliens studied the designs. Confusion replaced amusement on their faces. The mathematical equations flowing through the display didn't make sense to them. They went against everything they knew about dimensional physics. This is nonsense, the council leader declared, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. These calculations, they're completely wrong. They shouldn't work. But they do, Stone said quietly. We're not here to ask for permission or approval. We're here out of courtesy, to inform the council that tomorrow, the Fibonacci will make its first official 7th-dimensional jump. You'll all kill yourselves, a concerned delegate warned. Even if by some miracle you've built what you claim, the human body can't survive higher dimensional travel. We learned this the hard way. Stone smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. We'd like to invite council observers aboard for the test flight. See for themselves. The chamber erupted in heated discussions. Some delegates volunteered immediately, certain they would witness a spectacular failure. Others warned against it, worried about safety. The council leader raised his hand for silence. Very well, Captain Stone. We will send observers, but know this. If this is some kind of trick or mistake, Earth's standing in the galactic community will suffer severely. Stone nodded and turned to leave, Reed following close behind. As they walked out, The laughter started again, but softer now, nervous. Some delegates were already reviewing the schematics more carefully, their expressions troubled. "They'll see tomorrow," Reed muttered as they headed back to their ship. Stone kept walking, a slight smile on his face. "Yes, they will. And then they won't be laughing anymore." Dr. Alex Gray stood in the Fibonacci's main laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex equations. The alien observers who had just boarded the ship watched with skeptical eyes as he began his explanation. "The problem," he said, pointing to a simple diagram, "wasn't that we needed more power. It was that everyone was thinking about dimensional travel wrong." One of the observers, a being made of pure energy, flickered with doubt. "Our civilizations have studied dimensional physics for thousands of years. Are you suggesting we missed something obvious?" "Not missed," Gray replied, adjusting his old-fashioned glasses. "Overthought." He pressed a button, and the lab's lights dimmed. A new hologram appeared, showing the human brain alongside various alien consciousness centers. The observers leaned forward despite themselves. "3 months ago, we discovered something interesting. When we tried to measure dimensional barriers, we found they changed when someone was watching them." Gray smiled. "At first, we thought our equipment was broken." The memory was still fresh in his mind. He remembered running the same test 50 times, getting different results every time someone new watched the experiment. His team had almost given up, thinking their sensors were faulty. But then we realized, consciousness itself affects dimensional barriers. The more complex the consciousness, the bigger the effect. An observer with crystalline skin made a sound like chiming bells, their version of a snort. "Impossible. Consciousness has no effect on physical laws." Gray walked to a small device sitting on a nearby table. It looked simple, just a clear cube with swirling mist inside. "This is a quantum consciousness amplifier. Would you like to see what it does?" The observers gathered around. Gray placed his hand on the cube. Instantly, the mist inside formed complex patterns, and the air in the lab seemed to ripple. "Human brains," he continued, "are unusual. Less evolved than many of yours in some ways, yes. But we discovered that our type of consciousness has a unique effect on dimensional space. We don't fully understand why yet. Maybe it's because we're younger, less set in our ways of thinking. Maybe it's something else entirely." He brought up another display, showing the Fibonacci's engine room. "We don't force our way through dimensions like conventional ships. We don't need massive energy reactors or dimensional folding devices. Instead, we use these." The display zoomed in on rows of cubes similar to the demonstration model, but larger. Each one pulsed with a soft light, the mist inside them moving in perfect synchronization. 200 quantum consciousness amplifiers, connected to a crew of 20. Working together, they don't just break through dimensional barriers. They convince space itself to let us through. One of the observers, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. "This breaks every law of physics we know." "No," Gray corrected gently. "It only breaks the laws of physics you thought you knew. The universe is stranger than anyone imagined. We just happened to stumble upon one of its quirks." He brought up footage from their first test. The small prototype ship, hardly bigger than a shuttle, simply shifted. There was no energy burst, no dramatic light show. It moved through dimensions like a fish swimming through water. "The best part," Gray continued, "the power requirements are minimal. The human mind does most of the work. The technology just amplifies what we can naturally do." The crystalline observer raised what might have been a hand. "But higher dimensions tear organic matter apart. The energy levels only tear things apart if you fight against the dimensional barriers." Gray interrupted. "We don't fight them. We work with them. It's the difference between breaking down a door and being invited to walk through it." He checked his watch. "The test flight begins in 3 hours. You'll all be able to see for yourselves. Though I should warn you, the sensation can be unusual for first-time passengers. The energy being pulsed rapidly, their species equivalent of nervous fidgeting. What kind of sensation? Like remembering a dream you haven't had yet, Gray said with a slight smile. Your minds will adapt. Ours did. As the observers filed out of the lab, Gray heard them muttering among themselves. Their tone had changed from mocking to uncertain. A few were already sending rapid communications to their homeworlds, updating their scientific councils. He turned back to his displays, checking the equations one final time. Everything was ready. Soon, they would show the galaxy that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one, even if it meant rewriting every physics textbook in existence. Sometimes, he mumbled to himself, you have to think like a child to see what the adults have missed. The countdown began. Captain Stone sat in his command chair, watching as his crew moved with practiced precision. Through the bridge's viewing windows, he could see hundreds of alien ships gathered at a safe distance. They looked like a field of stars, their running lights blinking in the darkness of space. All quantum consciousness amplifiers online. Tom Reed reported from his station. Power levels stable at 5%. The alien observers on the bridge exchanged glances. Just 5% power for dimensional travel. Their ships needed at least 80% power for even basic fourth-dimensional jumps. Begin consciousness sync, Stone ordered. The ship's interior lighting dimmed slightly, taking on a soft blue tinge. Each crew member placed one hand on their personal interface panels, simple clear squares built into their stations. Inside each panel, mist began to swirl. Consciousness sync starting. Dr. Gray's voice came over the speakers. Everyone remember your training. Don't force it. Let your minds drift naturally. The alien observers watched their instruments with growing confusion. The energy readings made no sense. The ship was using less power than a standard food replicator, yet dimensional distortions were beginning to form around the hull. First barrier approaching, Reed announced. Fourth dimension in range. Stone nodded. Take us through. Nice and easy. The stars outside seemed to blur, but there was none of the violent shaking that usually accompanied dimensional travel. Instead, the ship moved smoothly, like a stone sinking into still water. Fourth dimension achieved, Reed reported calmly. Moving toward fifth. One of the alien observers, unable to contain themselves, burst out. Impossible. The hull should be under immense strain. The crew should be experiencing dimensional sickness. This defies all known physics. Stone smiled slightly but kept his focus on the main display. Fifth dimension in range. How are the amplifiers holding up, Dr. Gray? Perfect harmony, Captain. The crew's consciousness patterns are synchronized at 99%, ready for sixth dimensional approach. Outside, space itself seemed to fold. The alien ships watching them appeared to exist in multiple places at once, a normal effect of higher dimensional observation. But while such sights usually caused severe vertigo in most species, the Fibonacci's crew remained completely calm. Sixth dimension achieved, Reed announced. All systems normal. Crew vital signs stable. Beginning approach to seventh dimensional barrier. The alien observers were no longer making skeptical comments. Their instruments were recording everything, and their bodies showed signs of stress just from watching the higher dimensional effects through the ship's protected windows. This is where it gets interesting, Stone said. Dr. Gray, begin final consciousness expansion. The mist in the interface panels began to pulse in perfect unison. Each crew member closed their eyes, their breathing synchronized. The ship's hull started to glow with subtle patterns, the spiral designs that the aliens had dismissed as decorative now shimmering with an inner light. Seventh dimensional barrier in range. Reed's voice was steady despite the extraordinary nature of what they were attempting. Ready on your mark, Captain. Stone took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. Begin seventh dimensional translation. The universe seemed to hold its breath. The alien observers' instruments simply stopped working. The readings had gone beyond their ability to measure. Through the windows, reality itself appeared to bend. And then, with no flash of light, no surge of power, no dramatic effects at all, the Fibonacci slipped into the seventh dimension. Translation complete, Reed reported, opening his eyes. We are now existing in seven-dimensional space. The alien observers stared in stunned silence at their readouts. The ship was using only 12% power. The crew showed no signs of dimensional sickness. Everything about this violated the laws of physics as they knew them. Stone stood up from his chair and walked to the main window. From this vantage point, he could see not just space, but time itself flowing around them like a river with countless branches. "Send word to the Galactic Council," he said quietly. "The test is successful. Humanity is ready to begin sharing our findings." He turned to face the shocked observers. "Though I suspect your scientists may need to update some of their basic assumptions first." Outside the ship, the gathered alien vessels hung motionless, their sensors recording the impossible. The age of human dimensional travel had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. First Officer Tom Reed blinked as new understanding flooded his mind. The seventh dimension wasn't just about moving through space differently. It was about existing in multiple states at once. Through the Fibonacci's windows, he could see something impossible. Everything. "Captain," he called out, his voice filled with wonder. "Are you seeing this?" Stone nodded slowly, his experienced eyes taking in views that no human was ever meant to see. The universe had become a vast tapestry of interconnected moments. Past, present, and future flowed together like rivers joining into a vast ocean. "Dr. Gray," Stone called over the ship's comm, "please explain what we're seeing to our guests." The alien observers stood frozen, their various biological and mechanical sensors overwhelmed by the input. Even their most advanced instruments couldn't process what was happening around them. Dr. Gray's voice came through clearly. "From our current position, we can observe multiple time streams simultaneously. Think of it like standing on a hill and watching several roads at once, except these roads are different possible realities." One of the alien observers, their crystalline form vibrating with tension, spoke up. But that would mean..." "Yes," Reed finished for them. "We can see potential futures, alternate presents, and multiple pasts, all at once." Through the windows, they watched a nearby star. They could see it as it was now, as it had been millions of years ago, and as it would be millions of years in the future, all simultaneously. The sight would have driven most beings mad, but the quantum consciousness amplifiers helped their minds process the impossible view. "Fascinating," one of the energy-based observers flickered rapidly. "Your consciousness technology doesn't just help you travel through dimensions, it helps you comprehend them." Stone smiled. "Exactly. The human mind is remarkably adaptable. We just needed the right tools to unlock its potential." Reed turned to his console, where multiple readouts showed different versions of the same space. "Captain, I'm detecting something interesting. There appear to be temporal echoes of other ships that haven't been built yet." The alien observers rushed to look at his readings, their previous skepticism completely forgotten. On the screen, ghost-like images of vessels showed designs centuries ahead of their time. "This is why we needed to master seventh-dimensional travel," Stone explained. "Humanity suspected that time and space were more fluid than anyone realized. Now we can prove it." Dr. Gray's voice chimed in again. "Watch this." The Fibonacci shifted slightly, and suddenly they could see their own ship, hundreds of versions of it, each one representing a different possibility, a different choice, a different moment. "Impossible," one of the observers whispered. "The energy required to maintain multiple quantum states is minimal," Reed replied. "When you work with the universe instead of against it, our power consumption is still under 15%. Stone walked to the main window, his reflection overlapping with versions of himself from different timelines. The real breakthrough wasn't technological. It was philosophical. We stopped trying to force our way through dimensions and learned to exist within them naturally. The ship's sensors picked up a massive surge of communications from the observing alien fleet. Every species was frantically reporting what they were witnessing to their homeworlds. "Should we show them the best part?" Reed asked with a slight grin. Stone nodded. "Dr. Gray, initiate multi-state positioning." The Fibonacci shimmered, and suddenly it existed in 3 different locations simultaneously. The alien fleet erupted in chaos as their sensors tried to track a ship that was, impossibly, in multiple places at once. "This is just the beginning," Stone said to the stunned observers. "Seventh-dimensional travel doesn't just let us move through space and time. It lets us exist in ways that were previously thought impossible." Reed checked his readings again. "Sir, the alien fleet's sensors are having trouble coping with our multi-state existence. Should we return to single-point positioning?" "Not yet," Stone replied. "They need to understand the full implications of what humanity has achieved. Sometimes seeing is believing." The observers stood in silence, watching as their most basic understanding of physics crumbled before their eyes. In the space of a few hours, humanity had not just caught up to the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, they had surpassed them in ways that would take centuries to fully comprehend. The attack came without warning. 3 warships appeared from hyperspace, their weapons already charged. They weren't part of the official observation fleet. Their designs were unknown, their intentions hostile. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace," Reeve announced calmly. "Energy signatures suggest weapons are hot." Captain Stone didn't seem concerned. "Dr. Gray, are the consciousness amplifiers still synchronized?" "Perfect sync, Captain. The crew is ready." The alien observers on the bridge began to panic. The Fibonacci had no visible weapons, no shield generators, no defensive systems they could recognize. The attacking ships were each larger than 3 Galactic Council battlecruisers combined. "You must return to normal space," one observer shouted. "Your ship will be destroyed." Stone smiled slightly. "Mr. Reed, show them why that won't be necessary." The first attacker fired a plasma beam capable of cutting through a small moon. The Fibonacci rippled. The beam passed through empty space. The ship now existed 3 meters to the left of where it had been, or rather, it had always been there, in one of its quantum states. "Fascinating targeting system they have," Reed commented, studying his readings. "Shame it can't track a ship that exists in multiple states of reality at once." The second attacker launched a swarm of autonomous hunter-killer drones. The Fibonacci's response was even more spectacular. It existed in 12 places simultaneously, creating a defensive pattern that confused the drone's targeting systems completely. "Sir," Reed reported, "I'm detecting quantum scanning beams. They're trying to locate our primary consciousness core." "Let them look," Stone replied. "Dr. Gray, would you explain to our guests why that won't work?" Dr. Gray's voice came through the speakers. "The consciousness core exists in a quantum superposition across all crew members. You can't steal what isn't in any single place." The third attacking ship tried a different approach, launching a temporal displacement weapon designed to force the target into normal spacetime. The weapon's energy wave passed harmlessly through the Fibonacci, all 7 versions of it that currently existed. "They're persistent," Stone noted. "Mr. Reed, I believe it's time for a demonstration of our own capabilities." "Aye, sir." Initiating 7th dimensional defense protocol. The Fibonacci didn't fire any weapons. It didn't need to. Instead, it began to exist in more and more states simultaneously, creating a complex pattern in spacetime. The attacking ships suddenly found themselves shooting at empty space, their targets always existing a few microseconds before or after their weapons fired. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the mighty warships were rendered completely ineffective by a vessel that never threw a single punch. "Impossible," one whispered. "They're using multi-dimensional existence as both offense and defense." "Not impossible," Reed corrected, "just unexpected. In the 7th dimension, the line between defense and offense becomes flexible. The attacking ships tried to retreat, but found themselves caught in a web of probability states. The Fibonacci existed in so many positions that hyperspace travel became impossible. There was no clear path through the quantum maze the ship had created. "They're powering down weapons," Reed reported. "And, yes, we're receiving a transmission." "They're surrendering." Stone nodded. "Accept their surrender. And send a message to the Galactic Council. We've apprehended some uninvited guests." The alien observers were still trying to process what they had witnessed. A single Earth vessel had just defeated 3 capital ships without firing a shot, using nothing but its ability to exist in multiple states of reality. "Your ship," one of them finally said, "it's not just a breakthrough in travel technology, is it? It's a completely new form of everything." "That's one way to put it," Stone replied. "The ability to exist in multiple dimensions doesn't just change how we move through space. It changes the very nature of what's possible." As Council peacekeeping ships arrived to take custody of the attackers, Reed turned to his captain. "Sir, should we return to single-state existence?" Stone looked at the still stunned observers. "Not yet. I think our guests need a little more time to understand just what humanity has achieved. Sometimes the best defense isn't a strong shield or powerful weapons. Sometimes," Reed finished with a smile, "the best defense is being everywhere and nowhere at once." The observers began frantically updating their reports. The galaxy hadn't just witnessed a new form of space travel. They had seen the birth of an entirely new form of existence, and humanity was leading the way. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Gone was the laughter from days before. Now thousands of delegates sat in stunned silence as they watched the recorded footage of the Fibonacci's demonstration and defensive capabilities. Captain Stone stood at the center of the chamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The council leader's 3 eyes were wide with what could only be described as awe. "Let me understand this clearly," the council leader began, his voice careful and measured. "Not only did you achieve stable 7th-dimensional travel, but you also developed an entirely new form of defensive technology in the process." "Not exactly," Dr. Gray replied from his position next to Stone. "The defensive capabilities aren't technology in the traditional sense. They're simply a natural result of understanding how consciousness affects dimensional space." The holographic displays around them showed the Fibonacci existing in multiple states during the attack. The council members watched again as the mighty warships were rendered helpless by a ship that never fired a shot. "But the power requirements," a delegate started, "are minimal," Stone finished. "Our ship was operating at 15% power during the entire incident. We could have maintained that state for years if necessary." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. Ships from advanced civilizations needed 80% power just to maintain basic shields. The implications were staggering. The council leader leaned forward. "Dr. Gray, would you explain to us how humans managed to solve this puzzle when our civilizations could not?" Gray stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "The answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Every species here tried to overcome dimensional barriers through pure technology. More power, more advanced engines, more complex computers. But we asked a different question. What if the barriers aren't meant to be overcome at all?" He activated a small device, projecting an image of the human brain alongside various consciousness patterns. "We discovered that consciousness itself naturally exists across multiple dimensions. We didn't need to break through dimensional barriers. We just needed to learn how to perceive them correctly." "Like learning to see a hidden image in a picture," Stone added. "The ability was always there. We just needed to adjust our perspective." One of the crystalline delegates chimed softly. "But surely the mathematical complexities were much simpler than everyone assumed," Gray interrupted gently. "The equations everyone used were unnecessarily complex because they were trying to force their way through dimensions. Our equations are quite simple in comparison. Sometimes a child's solution is better than an expert's." The council leader stood, his form towering over the human representatives. Captain Stone, Dr. Gray, humanity has achieved something unprecedented. You haven't just advanced space travel, you've changed our fundamental understanding of reality itself. Stone nodded. That's why we're here. Earth is ready to share this knowledge with the galaxy. But it will require everyone to unlearn some deeply held beliefs about how the universe works. Unlearning, the council leader said thoughtfully. Yes, perhaps that is exactly what we need. He turned to address the chamber. For too long, we have assumed that advancement must mean complexity. These humans have shown us that sometimes the opposite is true. The chamber erupted in discussion. Thousands of delegates began talking at once, their voices mixing in a cacophony of different languages and sounds. The council leader raised his hands for silence. Earth will no longer be considered a developing civilization, he announced. From this day forward, humanity will be recognized as teachers of dimensional physics. All member species are encouraged to send their brightest minds to Earth for training. Stone and Gray exchanged glances. This was what they had hoped for, not just acceptance, but a chance to help guide the galaxy toward a new understanding. We would be honored, Stone replied. Though I should warn you, our teaching methods might seem unusual to your people. Captain, the council leader said with what might have been a smile, after what we've witnessed, I believe the galaxy is ready for some unusual methods. As the chamber filled with sounds of agreement, Stone looked out at the assembled delegates. The same beings who had laughed at humanity days ago were now eager to become their students. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony after all. 6 months after the Fibonacci's historic demonstration, Earth had changed. The once quiet space around the planet now buzzed with activity. Ships from every corner of the galaxy arrived daily, carrying scientists, engineers, and scholars eager to learn humanity's secrets. Captain Stone stood at the window of the newly built Dimensional Academy, watching alien vessels of all shapes and sizes dock at the orbital stations. Next to him stood the same council leader who had once laughed at human claims of seventh-dimensional travel. Remarkable, the council leader said, his 3 eyes taking in the scene. In half a year, Earth has become the center of dimensional physics research in the galaxy. Stone nodded. We had to build 5 more academies just to handle all the students. Dr. Gray barely sleeps these days, trying to teach all the advanced classes. As if summoned by his name, Dr. Gray entered the room, followed by a group of alien students. Even the most advanced beings in the group carried simple notebooks and pencils, their first lesson in the human approach to learning. The hardest part, Gray said, setting down a stack of papers, is getting them to stop relying on their advanced computers. Sometimes you need to work things out by hand to really understand them. The council leader watched as one of his own species' top scientists struggled to draw a simple spiral pattern. I never thought I'd see a 5th circle master using paper and pencil. That's exactly why it works, Stone replied. When you strip away all the complexity, the underlying principles become clear. Through another window, they could see the Fibonacci in its dock, surrounded by scaffolding. Not for repairs, it was being used as a teaching tool. Dozens of alien engineers studied its deceptively simple design, learning how the spiral patterns on its hull helped guide consciousness through dimensional barriers. Production of the first non-human 7th-dimensional ship begins next week, Gray announced proudly. The Crystal Collective finally understood the consciousness synchronization principles. The council leader's skin rippled with excitement. So soon. We expected it would take decades to replicate your technology. It's not about replicating technology, Stone corrected gently. It's about understanding principles. Once you grasp those, the rest follows naturally. A young alien student rushed into the room, their energy form pulsing with excitement. Professor Gray, I did it. I achieved consciousness synchronization without using any technology. Gray smiled. Excellent. You see, he turned to the council leader. Once they stop trying so hard, it becomes almost easy. Outside, a new ship was arriving, This one massive even by Galactic Council standards. Stone recognized it as belonging to the same species that had attacked the Fibonacci months ago. But now they came as students, not enemies. The galaxy is changing, the council leader observed. For millennia, we believed advancement meant building bigger ships, more powerful engines, more complex computers. Now you're learning that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Stone finished. Humanity didn't succeed because we were smarter or more advanced. We succeeded because we were willing to question basic assumptions. Gray gathered his papers. If you'll excuse me, I have a class to teach. Today's lesson: why meditation is more important than mathematics in dimensional travel. As Gray left, Stone watched more ships arrive. Each one carried beings who had once thought humans were primitive, barely worth noticing. Now they came eager to learn, ready to unlearn everything they thought they knew about the universe. You know what the best part is? Stone said to the council leader. Every species brings their own perspective. Together, we're discovering things about dimensional travel that even we hadn't imagined. The council leader's three eyes blinked in sequence. You humans continue to surprise us. When you first announced the Fibonacci's capabilities, we laughed. Now the galaxy learns from children who have barely begun to explore space. Stone smiled. Sometimes the best teachers are those who haven't forgotten how to learn. Outside, the Fibonacci's spiral hole patterns caught the sunlight, sending shimmers across its surface. The patterns weren't just decoration or even technology. They were a reminder that the universe was simpler and more wonderful than anyone had imagined. The new era had begun, and it started not with a bang or a breakthrough, but with a simple question. What if we've been looking at this all wrong?